So, former NFL scout Daniel Kelly, who graded Brock Purdy last season as a round 1 quarterback, ranks Caleb Williams in this upcoming draft as a 4th-round prospect. Now, he, in a quote that he released, he absolutely goes to town on Caleb Williams. He says, and I quote, He's much closer to Johnny Manziel than Patrick Mahomes on the spectrum. I mean, that with respect and sensitivity, but that's what I would say if I was a scout sitting in the pre-draft meetings. He continues by saying, we witnessed Caleb Williams having a mental breakdown right before our eyes, crying uncontrollably in his mother's arms. To me, as a former NFL scout, he's the most mentally fragile player I've ever evaluated, quarterback or otherwise. He has little experience dealing with adversity, even by his own admission. And then he gives a quote that Caleb Williams said, talking about 75. They went 7-5 with no playoff hopes. The most fragile player he's ever evaluated. That is incredibly rough for a guy that hasn't even entered the NFL yet. I want to know.
Daniel Kelly. I never heard of him.
I believe he's a former.
I mean, maybe
Jets
he flipped
NFL
the coin
scout
on the quarterbacks and said, maybe Brock Purdy ought to be considered a first rounder. Who would ever remember it? And unless Brock Purdy actually came out and played great, like he's done, and probably should have been higher than Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft, right?
Well, to answer your question, he spent 4 years as the scout for the New York Jets.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that says a lot.
So I want to know, should the teams like, Washington or Chicago, should they be concerned about drafting Caleb Williams? Because this is not the first time in, recent memory that some of these former and current NFL scouts, anonymously or just outright, are voicing their concerns about, how far Caleb Williams can go entering the NFL.
Are there more scouts and more talent evaluators saying that Caleb Williams might not be what everyone thinks?
I've seen and heard a couple so far that are saying that he's not as great as people are saying.
Oh, yeah?
So do you think teams should be concerned with how much negativity is surrounding him at this current moment?
He's wearing number 13. That's not a very lucky number.
What's the number he's given? Yeah.
Brock Purdy had 13 on, too. He just lost the Super Bowl.
But he made it to the Super Bowl.
He did make it, yeah. That's true. I think that Caleb Williams has some great stats as a college player. I think he has over 10,000 passing yards in college. He has some stats that look amazing. But USC has not been the team that has been talked about or has had the kinds of success in recent years that some others have. And they've fallen in stature as a team. I think that the kinds of pressure that you encounter when you're one of the top teams like Alabama or Michigan or Washington, right? That's where you separate the men from the boys, and with the players that can excel in that environment. And USC really hasn't had that kind of environment. They haven't played in that kind of environment in recent years. I'm not sure why. I mean, they used to be a dominant team. They used to be ranked right up there, play for the national championship every once in a while, but not for quite a long time. So, coming out of that school, and as you say, he is a little mentally fragile. That may be something that teams ought to consider. But it doesn't look like they are, because there's all this talk of Justin Fields being traded and the Bears picking Caleb Williams number 1.
Yeah. Well, first of all, like you said, some of the numbers that Caleb Williams has,
he's got great numbers.
His touchdown to interception ratio is 93-14. That's incredible. Yeah. But what we saw this season was a lot fewer touchdowns. And he had the same amount of interceptions as he did last season.
Well, they didn't make it. They didn't have any hope. The record was 7-5,
8-5 to end the year. But at the current moment, when Caleb Williams said that quote, they were 7-5. But yeah, when you have 12 fewer touchdowns and you also have nearly 1,000 fewer yards, the touchdown interception ratio obviously does decrease, and you don't see all the finesse and prowess that Caleb Williams, that people are projecting on Caleb Williams to have. Caleb Williams in his career, though, does not do well against top-tier opponents, against top 5 teams. Would you believe that he has a losing winning percentage?
Yeah. Now, I'm not that surprised, because USC
doesn't play top-tier teams like Alabama, Georgia.
Yeah, they don't. They have not had the kind of talent that have kept them up there in the rankings. They weren't a ranked team this year, were they?
No.
Yeah. So, they played against Colorado State, right?
Colorado Deion's team, Colorado straight up. They nearly choked that game. We remember Colorado had a massive comeback late in the game and nearly lost against a team that had no offensive line. Shadur Sanders, every time he stepped back, was about to get killed in the pocket. And they somehow, and I believe there was a few turnovers that Colorado had that really just kept them out of the game early, and then they mounted an incredible comeback. And you get this feeling, and I've mentioned this to you before, this word of generational talent gets moved around and put on players so often. We talk about Trevor Lawrence, generational talent. No, he's not. Now, some players turn into generational talents when they hit the NFL. Brady, Mahomes, by the way, I believe he had a losing record at Texas Tech. And Texas Tech is now one of the big.
But he was highly touted when he was drafted. Mahomes.
The Chiefs moved up to get him.
Yeah, a smart move, man.
But some, like for instance, a couple people, and Mitch Trubisky, I believe he was right up there. Deshaun Watson obviously was right up there, winning with Clemson in the national championship. But Mahomes wasn't one of these like, okay, let's see, could he go number one? Yeah, why not? He might be able to. Mahomes wasn't that type of a guy. And now all of a sudden we're hearing, oh yeah, Caleb Williams. We'll never see another quarterback like this in 10 years. We hear the same thing about Trevor Lawrence. We hear these generational talents get moved around so often that what is a generational talent now? Is it a guy who's really good in college? Who's the best quarterback in college for a time in a place?
Well, what's the standard that you would measure generational talent against? Tom Brady.
Well,
Patrick Mahomes. Those are generational talents.
Those are generational talents in the NFL. Tom Brady was not a generational talent in college.
Not at all.
Right, but in the NFL, he became it. If we're talking about a guy and we're putting the label on him, he's a generational talent in college. He has to be the top. He has to be the best player without question for however long he's in college for.
Now, Tom Brady might have been a generational talent in college if they'd let him play.
Maybe.
Yeah, he didn't. He didn't play until his junior year, and then in his senior year they were. Drew Henson was in there. They were alternating them. Henson would start out and get him way behind, and then Brady would come in and catch up.
Yeah.
So Brady didn't get a fair shake in college and get the reps that he should have gotten. I don't think, given how he turned out in the NFL. Right? If they'd known that he was going to be like that, they would have started him every game from his freshman year.
Absolutely.
And then he might have had generational talent to stats as a college player. Who knows?
Very, very well might have. In my mind, is Caleb Williams going to be a bust? Probably not. But this quote, and Daniel Kelly does bring up a couple of good points. When he faces adversity, he breaks down as just a human being. He doesn't have the motor, the drive, okay, we'll get him next time. He breaks down.
Oh, really? He was crying in his mother's arms?
He cried in his mother's arms after a crushing loss. That's when we talked about it last time, when Colin Cowherd said that, his camp, he heard from the camp that reportedly he didn't want to be, he did not want to go to Chicago. I said it was a character issue. And I still believe that. Because if you don't have the mental toughness, whether it be you got pampered early on, you were always, you had yes men around you all the time, or you just think so highly of yourself. And that's where I can sort of see the comparison with Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel came into the, he was in college football, slinging the ball around, making crazy plays, and he brought that personality to the NFL, and we looked and we saw how it turned out. Now, I think Caleb Williams is a little bit more mature than Johnny Manziel was.
No, Johnny Manziel had some
drinking
problems, right?
But when it comes to Caleb Williams, we now praise him because he's making, these crazy on-the-run moves, which, hey, they are phenomenal throws, incredibly accurate. But to be called the greatest in college football and to be the no doubt, undisputable number one overall pick in the draft for 2 straight years now, and that goes to your head.
Yeah.
And then this season you regress, and people still think of you as the clear-cut number one overall pick. In my mind, that's going in saying, well, let's take a look at the season. They went from last year where Caleb Williams with 46 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. He was phenomenal. He was like, okay, this guy's going to be number 1 pick in the draft. Then this season, you only have 30 touchdowns and 5 picks. And
that's still pretty good.
And you were 8-5. And we saw you break down. What
was his record the year before?
The year before, they were, just had it up before. 2022, USC's record was 11-3.
Oh, so that's pretty good.
They were 12th in the final standings.
Got it.
So they were technically ranked, but obviously you're...
Well, maybe they lost a lot of players that graduated,
Just the complete breakdown. Now, the defense, I'll create a little bit of context here. The defense for USC wasn't great this season. Some could say that it was terrible, but that's what I mean by fighting through adversity. And this is also why I say it's a character issue. We heard that reportedly he said he wants a stake in whatever team drafts him. You don't hear about that. You don't hear that with anybody. Where you want a percentage stake of your team
when you're a rookie.
When you're a rookie, you haven't proved yourself in the NFL yet.
That's crazy.
And not only that, if you can't fight through adversity on USC, and you don't have the motor and the drive to bounce back from it, and you sort of give in, and by the end of it you break down. Newsflash, because you're one of the top tier quarterbacks in the NFL, you're going to the worst team in the NFL. So why would you be away from adversity if you're the best quarterback in college, which then you get drafted to the worst NFL team? Guess what? There'll be adversity there too. And when it comes
There's adversity everywhere.
Exactly. And let's say the Bears either trade back or don't draft Caleb Williams. That would be a worse situation for Caleb Williams because you're going to the Commanders, which have an offensive line that Sam Howell got blasted behind. The weapons inconsistent, running game inconsistent, defense just traded away your top 2 rushers. So your defense is going to regress. Your offensive line needs serious improvement. Running game, I think it's not all that great. You have Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, but we're not talking about any of the top tier receivers. Terry McLaurin is pretty much up there. But we aren't talking about a tier of Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, or Puka Nacua. We're not talking about those types of players. Terry McLaurin's a really good receiver. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't put him in your top 5. Might fringe top 10 receiver in the league.
He's good. I think he's good.
So you're gonna face adversity. And let's just say, just for the sake of this argument, let's say the Commanders pass on you. Let's say the Commanders shock the world and draft Jaden Daniels as the first quarterback off the board. So then the Patriots would draft Caleb Williams most likely. The Patriots have arguably the worst receiving core in the NFL. The offensive line, which improved late, was still very bad. It was one of the worst in the NFL grade-wise. Tight ends, Hunter Henry might be gone. Running game, you only have Ramondre Stevenson right now. The offense is not great. It's not pretty.
Do you think Zeke will get another job?
I think the Patriots should seriously consider re-signing Zeke. But we're talking about no matter where you go, because you're the best quarterback in college, you're going to be on one of the worst teams in the NFL.
So who do you think Daniel Kelly thinks is the best quarterback? Did he say?
He does not say who he thinks the best quarterback is in this article.
Well, he picked Brock Purdy is number 1.
Well, no, he says a first-round quarterback.
Okay, well, that's in the top 32.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
who does he think?
Right.
Who does he think the best one is? I wonder. That'd be interesting to know.
I would also be curious who he thinks is the best quarterback in this draft. It probably, for me, it's Jaden Daniels. Outside of Caleb Williams, because I do think Caleb Williams, if we're talking about just pure talent, whether it still needs a lot of work or not, refinement, he does have probably the highest ceiling out of any of these quarterbacks. But he also talks about how the amount of pressure on Caleb Williams is incredible. Every practice, you're going to be surrounded by media people. Every throw, people are going to be nitpicking at every single throw. Oh, it was a little bit too far to the left. Oh, he threw it too high on one pass out of the 30 he threw in this portion of practice. While I think a 4th round grade for Caleb Williams is a bit much, he does make good points with the fact that, you know, when his team isn't doing well and they lose games, he breaks down. That's not good for scouts that are going to be drafting high who their teams aren't very good. Make good points. I'll agree with them with that, but the 4th round grade, I don't agree with whatsoever. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, if you want to check out the full episode, make sure you click the I in the top right-hand corner right now. If you want to listen to this show anywhere you go, make sure you go to anchor.fm/The Harvey Hour or anywhere you get your podcasts.